I'm tempted to say exhaustive kind of a presentation. Very relevant. I think we have a lot of questions for her, which we'll reserve to the end of the session. The last speaker for this afternoon session is Mr. Sambath. Mr. Sambath threatened me, saying that he'll only give me 2 lines of his CV. I told him we can do that, but there's a risk. Risk is, I have a mandate to read a CV of 10 lines. So if you don't give me 10 lines, I'll repeat the same 2 lines 5 times. So he fell a prey for the threat. He fell in line. He now sent me a 10-line CV, which I'll read out. Right. He's an electrical electronics engineer from an MBA from IIM Calcutta, with experience in handling various industrial projects involving technology transfers and joint ventures for over 3 decades. Retired as CEO of Indian operations of a German transnational organization in India. This is interesting. He's a part-time techie. In fact, he said that yesterday also. So I went around searching yesterday, what is a part-time techie? And I've still not found a definition for that. Let's hope he tells us what it is. Who follows global technology, the technology trends, and a common man with an uncommon interest to understand interaction between humans and natural world. I will tell you something about him and a natural world. Okay. I'll tell you something about him. Morning, we are talking about the fan. What does the fan do? It has a blades, it goes around and gives the air. An out-of-box thinker like Sampath asked the question, why should the fan do all this to give us? Why don't we rotate ourselves and get the fan? That's his brilliance. Sampath, floor is yours. 30 minutes from now.
That's okay. I think okay, anyway, the title of the talk is Food and Agriculture, Some Thoughts and Questions of a Common Man, and you recognize the common man. Anyway. Okay. He's the iconic common man of India. Okay. So, thank you, Dr. Ram Subramaniam, for the introduction. Let me start the Upanishadic way. He defined what I am. Let me define what I am not. Niti. Niti, niti, niti. Okay? So the caveat. I have a caveat here. The caveat is, I'm not an agricultural scientist or researcher. Neither am I a plant geneticist, agronomist, or biotechnologist. Nor am I an expert on nutrition. Niti. Okay? We said that. Huh? Yes. Now comes the thing. I have to give the caveat. That is very important because of the second statement. Because of the second statement. It says the presentation is purely based on my experiments with farming, okay, observations, chats with farmers, and general reading over the last 6 years or so as to find answers to some questions like, why do farmers commit suicides though agricultural output is very high? Every day we read agricultural output has reached this level and things like that. Why are health problems increasing? All right. These are some questions that bothered me, so I read this type of stuff. Dr. Vijay Kumar talked about a lot of things on safety. He talked about industrial safety. But 70% or 75% of India's population is engaged in this classic occupation called farming or agriculture. And that is how civilization has developed. Now a simple question, what is food? Any quick answer? What is food? What we eat is one answer. Yeah, right. So, yeah. So the concept is food is something that gives you energy and nutrition. That's what food is about. And what are the three major components of food? Yeah, carbohydrates, fat and proteins are the major components of food. Minerals, etc. come as a part of nutrition. Like Carl Sagan used to say, we are made of stardust. Means we consist of a lot of magnesium, silicon, and things like that, which are all originating from the stars. Which one? No, that is not a part of this. Taste is the biggest problem today. What is the main source of energy for the body? No. Main source of energy for the body is carbs, carbohydrates. Right? That is the main source of the energy of the body. That energy, when you say carbs, what does it actually mean? Starch. Otherwise known as our favorite thing called sugar. Okay? Sugar comes from starch. Right. Now sugar is the main source of energy for your body. Okay? Everything is dependent upon sugar. The whole natural world is made up of sugar. What do plants do? They absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. This is high school science. They take water from the ground, and what do they release? They release oxygen, and they make sugar. So sugar is the main source of energy for your body. Then why has sugar become a bad word now? Now everybody is complaining about sugar. Why is sugar now a bad word? Now this is a question we have to ask. Because the whole natural world is based upon sugar. So then why is sugar a bad word for us? So this is the question that I started. No, wait, I'll come to it. It's not a question of excess and all. There are some interesting things that I found. How does our tradition think of food? This is very important. Our tradition always considered food as, I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it right, but because the Sanskrit word transliterated into English, it's Mahavaisajya. Mahavaisajya. Okay, or it is a most superior medicine. In Ayurveda, Ayurveda considers food as medicine. Okay? And our ancestors taught with a wholesome diet, there is no need for separate medical treatment. With an unwholesome diet, even treatment becomes questionable. So food is the basis for everything. Right. Now we'll have to look at the importance of nutrition. Now nutrition is all about how to keep the body functioning well. If your cells are absorbing sugar, then the cells have to be properly maintained. Now this comes from nutrition. This is what all these things like vitamin B, A and all these things do. Now we got to understand nutritious food can both prevent disease as well as play a role in disease management as it builds immunity. That's what nutrition does. You can't fight all the viruses in the world. You can't fight all the bacteria in the world. The body has to build immunity. And that comes from nutrition. According to WHO, globally 1 in 3 people suffer from malnutrition. And what we say as NCDs, non-communicable diseases, continue to be the leading cause of death. And this comes from lack of nutrition. NCDs are one of the biggest worries. Now Now, what is the problem of nutrition? Is they say poor nutrition has become an even bigger health issue than smoking. But do we talk about it? We don't. Okay. If people can modify their diets, 1 in 5 deaths can be prevented globally, just with modification of diets. Now we ask the question, how did this happen in spite of advances in food production and technology? Right? We are a very scientific civilization. We have made enormous strides in food production. How did this happen? That we lost out on this nutrition. Now we are even sicker than before. Okay. That's because food and medicine have become separated. Now it is medicine before food and after food. Okay, that is a reality. Okay. Now this will automatically raise a question. Is there a problem with agriculture? That food has become like this? Is modern agriculture the cause for such type of things? Because this comes up, because agriculture is the main agriculture is the main source of food. Why I say that is because then you can say fishing is there, all these type of things. But majority of the world, food comes from agriculture. Okay, hunting, fishing, everything is there, but agriculture is this thing. Now when we think that agriculture is the main source of food, naturally we have to ask, has food production not been able to, or improvement in food production not been able to deliver the type of nutrition that is needed for mankind, for humanity? And the next question obviously comes, has the quality of food decreased with increase in food production? These are important questions that we need to address as far as I'm concerned. Now when you step outside Srivathsam onto the highway, what do you see? Paddy fields, green paddy fields, and you all say how green it is. It's a result of the Green Revolution, right? But then if you stop for a moment and think, not one grain of paddy that is grown there, you consume here. It grows out just outside your gate. But you don't consume a single grain of that. Right? Why does this happen? No, you can finish it. It's not a question of supply chain. There's something deeper to that. Exactly. Exactly. Why does that happen? Does it make sense? It doesn't make sense. Because the food grown in a certain area, because there are communities in the US which don't eat anything which is grown outside 100 kilometers of their place. But the interesting thing is, I refer to it, it's a product of the Green Revolution. Why it's a product of the Green Revolution is, today food is monetized. Okay? So we need to now look at the Green Revolution. Of course, all of you would have heard of the Green Revolution, and the last 1 month or 6 weeks, Green Revolution has also been in the papers for obvious reasons. You know the reason. What was the reason? M.S. Swaminathan passed away. He's considered the father of the Green Revolution in India. Of course, he's the father of the Green Revolution in India, but the actual father of the Green Revolution is Norman Borlaug, who introduced the first high-yielding variety of wheat seeds. And he won a Nobel Prize for it. Now, 60 years later, we look at the problems. So, Green Revolution is credited with a manifold increase of production, food production, whether it be wheat or rice. Why did the Green Revolution happen? Any reason? Now, I'll come to that. Actually, the reason why it happened was there were projections of famine across the world. Okay? Projection of famines. Okay? Because of the Malthusian theory. You know who Thomas Malthus was? Thomas Malthus was an economist who said, in the world, as the population keeps going, food production will not be able to catch up. Okay? So the population will not get food. So population will die. Okay? Then the cycle will continue. Okay? So it will go like population comes up, food production goes, like that it will go. And unfortunately, India was the global, as they call him, global poster boy or poster child for the looming Malthusian disaster. They said a big disaster is going to happen. They said there are going to be droughts and all these type of things. And on top of it, huge quantities of American wheat was being imported into the country. Okay, which was like the US government and the Indian government at that time. We are talking about the 60s. Okay, they're a little worried. So what did the Green Revolution want to do? I think I should move my slide here. What is the Green Revolution? What are the objectives of the Green Revolution? The objective was to push for food self-sufficiency and affordability as well as nutritional security. These were the objectives for the Green Revolution. So how does this happen? So it meant that you introduced hybrid varieties of cereals. The first hybrid varieties were, of course, wheat, to improve production based upon fertilizers and pesticides. This was the basis. So therefore, India's production in 1951 was about 50 million tons of grain. I think the latest figures are about 330 million. So that's a 7 times increase in 7 decades. But this type of a model of using high yielding varieties of grain ended up creating more problems, which after 60 years we recognize. Usually science is like that. You introduce something and then after 50, 60 years, you scramble to correct all the mistakes that you made in 60 years. It doesn't happen. Okay? So the same case with the Green Revolution. So the standard narrative of India's Green Revolution was based on 2 propositions. One was that India faced a food crisis. Okay? With farms mired in tradition and unable to feed an exploding population. And the population was expected to go through the ceiling. And the second proposition that still people believe in is the miracle seeds that were introduced at that time by Norman Borlaug. Borlaug worked on wheat seeds. He didn't work so much on rice seeds. Rice seeds was our own invention. That from 1968, our wheat or grains production was so high, and it was all credited to the Green Revolution. But, with the benefit of hindsight and research today, both those propositions are false. Okay? So it was never like that. The shortage of food was not because of farming in the 60s. It was not created by farming, but was created by policy decisions. There are 2 types of policy decisions. One is India was trying to industrialize very heavily. So a lot of workers went into urban areas to work in industrial sector. So this rising population in the urban sectors had to be fed. So they needed to get a lot of grain, which they imported. And then the government of India, what it did was, it encouraged farmers to grow non-food crops for export. So it's like the British times, when a lot of farms in Bihar were converted to growing opium for the British, for the opium trade in China. Similarly, here it was done to, they started cultivating jute for export purposes. So now they find the miracle seeds of the Green Revolution were not inherently more productive. The thing is, they just responded much better to chemical fertilizers and pesticides. The interesting thing is, now they're saying that when Bharath had a hell of a lot of cows at that time and manure was freely available, why did India end up using chemical fertilizers? Good question, because then the seeds needed chemical fertilizers. It was based upon chemical fertilizers, utilization of chemical fertilizers. After 1967, India, of course, had a big boom in food production, but the cause was not the seeds. It was the input-intensive approach. Now we'll see the problems of that later. And then added to that policy of export was also that you have the same famous thing called MSP. So you started paying higher amounts for crops. So many farmers shifted to growing wheat. That also increased the production of wheat. So a stage came when food production actually also dropped, and then they scrambled together and ended up using more fertilizer, more acreage, more irrigation, etc. In 1965, this is a very interesting statistic. In 1965, Indian farmers needed 8 kilograms of fertilizer to grow an average ton of food. By 1980, that's in 15 years, it took 44 kilograms. That's the amount of fertilizer that went into growing 1 ton of food. And the fertilizer is expensive. It's not cheap. Now wait, I'm coming to that. So essentially what India did was, they got free food aid from the US. They replaced it with importing fertilizer. Okay, because they were not growing food. They tried growing food. Today, India is one of the largest importers of fertilizers, and we still continue importing fertilizers. I think in 2022, the figure was about $17 billion. This type of change, what we could have done with our own manure and technology and things like that, we replaced a hell of a lot with fertilizer. And of course, recent research shows that the Green Revolution also caused a lot of environmental problems. One of the major problems is, globally, only 17% of what is applied is taken up, of fertilizer, is taken up by plants. 83% literally goes down the drain. What it does, it gets washed into waterways. It gets ultimately into the sea. And so you see algae blooms, you see a lot of it smothers aquatic life, it screwed up everything. Only 17% is absorbed. You go tell a farmer, he will say, sir, last year I put 25 kilograms, this year I'll put 40 kilograms. Because the thing is. Now, for a moment, we'll have the goals of have the goals of the Green Revolution been achieved or realized? Maybe in terms of output. But otherwise, there are a lot of question marks. Now we say the growth in the output of major food crops has been largely input-driven, accompanied by a significant expansion in the area under cultivation and, more importantly, the area under irrigation. So when we went from the 55 million tons to 330 million tons, correspondingly, irrigation area has increased. The land under cultivation has also increased. I don't have the latest figures on fertilizers, but interestingly, chemical fertilizers, which were about in the 1960s, were used 2 kilograms per hectare. Today they are using 159 kilos per hectare. 160 kilos of chemicals are being put into the soil, every crop. That has decreased. That has also decreased because, see, the thing is, there is no ratio like that because the ratio will act only if you are using a standard measure. To get the same output, you are going on increasing your input. You get my point? If you get 1 ton of grain from about say 10 kilos, now you are going to 40 kilos to get the same output. Because I'll come to that later in this. So what has happened after 6 decades? Agricultural production has gone up, food grain production has gone up, but still farmers commit suicide. That is the saddest part. Everywhere, because of poor income and high debt burdens. And, No, that apart, the problem is when you talk about increasing inputs, he has to buy fertilizer, pesticide and things like that, it increases his debt burden also. And that causes a lot of stress in the farming sector. That I've seen personally, so I know. I also lose money in farming. Has Green Revolution impacted nutrition and sustainability adversely? Of course, the general consensus is yes. Now we got to understand that nature loves diversity. Nature is something that is very diverse. But we seem to be working towards standardization most of the time. We need to bracket everything, compartmentalize everything. As long as science tries to understand nature, it's all okay. But once we start fiddling around with it, then the law of unintended consequences kicks in. And that is what we have seen in the Green Revolution. Now we will look at some of the problems the Green Revolution has created that will be very similar to what you would see in safety in other places. Pesticide usage, we are all familiar with it. Okay? We use pesticides right at home to the field in various forms. There's been a significant increase in the usage of pesticides. And India, by the way, is the largest producer of pesticides in the world. But globally, it has been found that a large amount of pesticides are really not needed. But in India, somehow that has not gone in. The problem in India is not only usage of pesticides, but also pesticide residue in everything that you eat. I have personally seen the day the paddy is harvested and taken to the center to be given to the government, they still spray pesticide on it. That's the effect, that is the extent of pesticide usage. The interesting thing about pesticide usage, which we find, that when you destroy one pest or several pests, it creates an imbalance in the predator-prey system. So we think very, very clever, we have destroyed one pest. But that pest comes back in a much bigger form, in a vigorous form. So you used to put another pesticide. So the cycle continues. So you keep on using larger concentrations of pesticide. And we forget that pesticides don't kill pests alone. They kill human beings also, but slowly. How many of you have heard of the Cancer Express? There is a train labeled the Cancer Express, which runs in India. It runs from Bathinda to Bikaner. Okay? Why it's called the Cancer Express? Because it carries people from Batinda and the neighboring areas of Punjab who are suffering from cancer to Bikaner, where they have a free hospital for cancer treatment. And it's called the Cancer Express. Unfortunate name. But why does this happen? Because of the excessive use of pesticides in Punjab. Now you tell me what is wrong with this picture. Swaminathan not to answer. Exactly. This is how they spray. Of course, this is a picture credited to Swaminathan, who has taken it in some field here. No, everything it affects. See, the whole system, it's a systemic failure, as we would call it. Okay. The thing is exposure. The second aspect of this is usage. You see a pesticide bottle, it will say 1 ml for 1 liter. A standard usage dose. So the guy buys it in the shop. Then he takes it home. And then he tells the guy who's going to spray, you put this quantity in 1 liter. Okay, so that would be 10 ml. Okay, then the guy who actually puts it said, he said 10 ml, I don't get something like this, I will take. So this is how concentrations go up. This is how it's done. Yeah. What is the other biggest site that you see in outside Srivathsam? A very interesting site that you see. Any guesses? Yeah, you see the borewells here. Happily, pumping out water and you feel very happy. You feel thrilled. This is a photograph taken outside Srivathsam. India has the highest demand for fresh water usage globally. But many parts of India are experiencing water stress today. Forget about the Kaveri behind you. Most of the things. The problem is that most of the crops introduced during the Green Revolution were water intensive. They relied upon heavy water. That is why you see most of the fields are flooded. And then the crop cycles also became shorter. People started, like if you have a borewell like this, then they can grow 3 crops, 4 crops per year with shorter crop cycles. So the water consumption went up. Punjab, for example, land of the 5 rivers, is considered to be one of the most water-stressed areas in India today. And the latest UN report published 1 week ago says it's already close to the tipping point. Punjab will become dry. Now you look at the status of Kaveri, you will know what happens. Yeah, water for agriculture would be a big problem because they are already depleting water sources at a phenomenal rate. Because one thing about Punjab, you should remember, going back to an earlier point, Punjab never grew rice earlier on. There was no rice grown in Punjab, it was only wheat. Because of MSP, they started growing rice. And what was the problem today about smog in Delhi comes from that also. Rice was not a crop in Punjab. But then they harvest it in September. By October end, they need to be ready for wheat. So they burned the residue. There was no rice crop in Punjab. Rice was not known in Punjab. Huh? It is, that's what I'm saying. It is water stressed, and the UN report says Punjab is already at the tipping point of a total water crisis. So it also has, other than water consumption, why I'm going back again. So all this adds to problems with soil fertility. Okay. The thing about crops now is there is no way in which crop residue or any other organic matter goes into the soil. It's done. Because people believe that you can do it with fertilizers. And with the application of pesticides and fertilizers, you have a heavy level of heavy metals like cadmium, lead, and arsenic in the soil today. And pesticides have another problem because they not only kill the pests, they kill the whole ecosystem there. Most of the beneficial pathogens in the soil are dead now, so nothing can survive there. And of course, the biggest problem is the monoculture. When you say monoculture, earlier on tradition, even 40, 50 years ago in India, or even in South India, in Kumbakonam, after 2 crops, they will have a thing of growing lentils. Ulundu, pairu, and things like that. You don't have that practice anymore. Nobody grows that. You know what's one of the reasons? No. You know why it is grown. That's for nitrogen fixation. We have read it in school, but nobody follows it anymore. You know the reason why it is not done anymore? The soil is so toxic that those plants don't survive. The soil, it cannot grow in that soil. There's no life in that soil. But of course, one of the least emphasized aspects of the Green Revolution is loss of diversity. When we say loss of diversity, we mean that today we see everything in terms of rice and wheat production. We don't see it in any other terms. Not in terms of lentils or not in terms of millets, nothing. You will be surprised to hear that India had a gene bank of rice of 3 lakh varieties of rice grown all over India. That was a total gene bank developed over millennia by our scientist farmers. Now they estimate nearly 1 lakh varieties are lost. I personally have felt it also because many of the thing about varieties is each variety was suited for a certain agroclimate condition. Today, because of monoculture, that is lost. Personally, I will tell you, in my land, I still own about 5 acres, the crops used to grow up to 6 feet. This was a special seed developed for that specific area. Why? Because during flooding, water used to stand for 4 feet. So the crop used to come on top. The second aspect, even if it got damp in the water, it never used to sprout. For the last 6 years, I've been searching for those seeds. There's nothing available. There is a special variety of rice grown in Kerala called the Pokali rice. You might have heard of it. Pokali rice has been grown in Kerala for 3,000 years. Unbroken tradition in the Alapi region. It's linked to shrimp farming. But they still grow it luckily over there. But you don't get that type of benefit because unless they'll grow it only if you are getting benefit out of it. So the basic reason also when other crops were not grown, only rice and wheat were grown, was basically monetization. So it goes to the question that if I'm going to sell it to the market, I better grow only rice and wheat. Why should I grow varieties which you will use? Now we come to the question, the earlier question is, why sugar got a bad name? I'll finish another 2 or 3 slides. Why did it get a bad name? I found an interesting answer for this. What high-yielding varieties actually did was they modified the starch structure in the cereal, at least in wheat. I don't have the data for rice, but it should have happened in rice also. When you say they modified the starch structure, it meant that the rate of absorption of this starch was higher. So if you compare with the rate of absorption with earlier varieties and this rate of absorption was very high, leading to a whole set of other problems, diabetic problems. This is one important aspect of science because science tells you only one portion of it. It is like this gain of function research on coronavirus. They tell you only one bit. Okay, they don't tell you the rest of it. It's like that. They developed rice, which said yields enormous quantities of rice. You have this huge million tons production, but you end up with the wrong starch. Now, of course, the move is saying talk about sustainable agriculture. Now it's sustainability in everything. I don't know. Every field has got something to do with sustainable. But in the world today, they feel that agriculture is on an unsustainable track. And I don't think you're going to get back onto the sustainable track. Why this is important is now the world is talking about the second green revolution. So they're going to introduce new varieties of seeds for you. Okay? Without learning from the mistakes of the past. Now they talk about organic farming. Organic farming is one solution. But can we really do organic farming? Can we get back to it? I have my own doubts, unless and until it's done in a very, very big way. But the interesting thing is, organic farming will always give lower yields. Are we prepared to take it? That's important. Now, interestingly, 2023, we got to talk about it. 2023 has been announced as the year of the millets. Can you guess why? Quick. But why are millets important? Again, interestingly, millets is one of the most climate resilient crops today. And it is not water intensive. Right? And it is a part of our diet historically. We have been eating that millet. We have forgotten. Of course, even Rajasthan now, bajra ki roti is very famous. Okay? But even in Tamil Nadu, millets used to form a part of the diet. Now everybody is forgotten about it. But unless and until farmers are incentivized to move to millets, they are not going to do it. Why should they do it? Because 2023 has been announced as the year of the millets? No, they are not going to do it. What we need to do... Now, what we need to do is a paradigm shift in thinking. Paradigm is the favorite word nowadays. One is in consumer awareness of nutrition. Of course, you get nutrition facts in a package. It says so much of sugar, so much of fat, so much of protein, and things like that. But more importantly, you need to know what is the quality of the sugar in it. So millets are one good viable option for nutrition, but also traditional varieties of rice. I think there has to be a big move to introduce traditional varieties of rice. That's very, very important according to me. Then comes the question of development indices. Now the question that I always ask myself is, should development be measured in terms of the number of hospitals and doctors that we add each year? Or in terms of the reduction in number of people falling ill and visiting doctors' hospitals due to the overall improvement of population health with better nutrition? Today, with GDP being the only metric, I think this is a very important question. If people are dying and your GDP is growing, it doesn't help. Food storage. 40% of food in the world is wasted. So increased packaging of food. The case of tomatoes. I don't have to go through it. But food storage is also a very important thing. The last point is, of course, our relationship with nature. That's important because we got this disconnect. I think people have talked about it earlier on. Only if we redefine our relationship with nature, then we are going to understand the loss of diversity. Without diversity, nature will kill you. That is sure. Human beings have got a limited lifespan on this earth. Of course, this is my favorite topic. It says, can a more equitable system of distribution of resources for farmers across regions be created? What does this mean? Anybody, any guess? I will tell you an example. The farmer outside Srivathsam grows 3 crops a year. Right? 50 kilometers downstream of Kaveri, that guy can't even get 1 crop per year. Was it always like this? I think Mr. Sitaraman can go back and think about the system of equitable distribution of resources during Chola times. We have a history of equitable distribution. Our villages were developed on the basis of equity, social equity. Everybody shared resources. Today it is not like that. The guy outside Srivathsam gets free electricity. The guy sitting near Mayavaram has no free electricity. He uses diesel pumps. So his main input for producing rice is diesel. So this is the type of distribution that we have today. And we need to think about it very seriously, because food is ultimately important. We can't think of anything else if we don't have food. The classic example is Sri Lanka. Right? They didn't grow any food, they were growing tea. Now you can't live on tea alone. So that problem, at least in India, will not happen in the near future, but it could happen. And you see the type of riots that will happen when the water table goes down, water resources are dead, and you are finished. Okay? Thank you.